All right, we are going to start chapter 6. I don't believe we're going to get through it. I'm not sure I want to get through it today, but chapter 6 is called Creating Illustrations with the Drawing Tools, and most specifically, we're going to learn the pen tool. How many of you use the pen tool in Illustrator? Do you like it? Yes? No?
Kind of tricky to use without them.
Okay. So, did you like it on the first day?
No, it's a learning curve.
Oh, thank you. There's a huge learning curve with the pen tool because it doesn't make sense at first. After a while, it's totally, I get it. I know what I'm doing. We are going to be using the mouse today, and you guys have used the Wacom drawing tablets in Kelly's class, right? Or you will if you haven't yet. Those of you that are on the Wednesday, you're done, right?
Yeah.
And you used them. So the drawing tablets basically put a drawing tablet in front of you and a physical pen that is now your input device. It serves as your mouse. So touching once is like a click, touching twice is a double click. Moving around with it above the surface moves your mouse or the cursor around where you want it to go. Touching the surface does something. So you can imagine when we're doing, later on we're going to learn about brush strokes and like digital painting. That is awesome because it's very natural. You're using a pen and you're making brush strokes. And the pen itself on the Wacom tablet is touch and pressure sensitive. So the harder you push down, it acts like maybe a pen would, where it gets thicker or darker or bolder. If you're holding it at an angle like you would with a calligraphy pen, it understands that angle and behaves that way. If I made you work with it today using the pen drawing tool and a physical pen, I think you would all cry and shoot me on day one. So we're going to work with what we call the potato, which is your mouse. After you start using the drawing tablets, and if you like them, you will hate working with a mouse. It'll feel like you're designing with a potato. Do you use a tablet regularly?
Yes.
Yeah, do you?
I've used one in high school.
Yeah. Did you feel that way? Like,
I never really used the pen tool with tablets and using one.
okay, Photoshop, sure. It's fun, and if you like it, you probably love the drawing tablets. A friend of mine went to that exclusively, also as a way of keeping her husband off her computer, because he can't figure out how to run it without a mouse present, which is pretty funny. He doesn't know, how do I click, or it's confusing. So, we're going to learn the pen tool today, just parts of it. And again, if it's frustrating, just know that you have to keep using this tool and it will become second nature eventually. And it will long before we're done with this class. So the more you use it, the better it gets. All right, let's open up a new file. So open from our Illustrator book files, go into lesson 6. And in lesson 6, we're going to open the practice file. And this is going to look like awesome, fun, dots. And for a while it is. All right, let's name this file. Save as. Let's name it Your Name, Pen Practice. And then let's go to artboard number 1 and fit that so we can see it. You can see the end product that we're going to make is this shape, kind of looks like a crown, and then they very nicely have provided us with a dot to dot. So I'm going to go to the dot to dot zone, zoom in on that a little bit. Okay, a little much. Yep.
My toolbars gone.
If anything on your workspace ever gets funky, do a window, workspace, reset essentials. And that should bring back the workspace to how it should be when we first start. Okay, we are going to use the pen tool. It's one of the main drawing tools in Illustrator because instead of combining shapes to make a cloud, for example, with pen tool you can just draw out this curve, connect them with a straight line. You're done. And once you get good with it, it's probably by far faster. It does take plenty of practice. That's also written in the book. So believe me, if you're frustrated with this, you're not alone. Give it time. It'll be okay, I promise. So Artboard 1, fit in the window, zoom in so we can see the bottom half. We're going to turn off our smart guides for this first part, and then later we're going to turn them on. But for now, view, smart guides, turn them off. All right, we're going to get the pen tool. The pen tool is letter P is the shortcut that pulls it up for you. It's probably the third tool in your toolbar. Click on the pen tool. Bring your cursor over into the workspace. First thing you should notice is that it has an asterisk beside it. That means that when you click, you're going to start working with the pen tool. It's ready to go. Now, typically when we're drawing out a shape, what we really want to do is make an outline that we can later fill with a color and remove the stroke if we want to. But we need to see the stroke as we're drawing it, and we don't want the fill color to be confusing us. So the first step is to come over here to the appearance window, change it to be no fill. We don't want it filling in with a color, and make sure that it's a black 1-point stroke. That's a really good point to start with your pen tool. All right, we're going to click on number 1 to start making something with our pen tool. Notice that the asterisk went away. A new feature in the last 2 or 3 versions has been this, well, they call it the rubber banding feature, where the line follows you. That used to not be there. So until you clicked, you didn't know what the connecting line was going to look like. Now it kind of draws out and follows along with you. So if we click on number 2, there's our first line. Perfect. From there, we can draw out to number 3 and click, go up to number 4, and this is about as easy as it gets. This is when the pen tool seems like your best friend. We're just making straight lines, and we're getting to number 7. And now what? Now what's the frustration? Look at my screen. It thinks I want to keep going, but I don't. And I don't want to make it a full shape, actually. I just want to be done right here, right now. There are 3 different ways of doing it. Deselect, which is a keyboard shortcut, but there's a bunch of easier ways. I'll tell you all 3. So Shift-Command-A deselects and stops this line from following you around. Also, holding down the Command button and clicking away from it stops it. Also, hitting the Escape key hits it. So quite often you have a hand near the keyboard and you can quick hit Command and click away. Now your selection is done. Notice I'm still in the pen tool. I have an asterisk, meaning that when I start again, it's going to start drawing again. So I want you to make another shape like this without following the dot to dots, make a smaller one. So click, go up, like just redo this shape without dot to dots. And then when you're done, make it stop using one of those methods that I told you. Command click away from it, escape, or Shift-Command-A. Okay, so the anchor points that were made when we did this are corner points. They're hard angles where the straight line comes in and then it angles out in some direction and goes out another way in a straight line. Grab your selection tool and position it over a straight line in this path. So between the numbers, like between 2 and 3. Notice it selected the whole thing. It put a bounding box over it all. The entire path and all the anchor points were selected. When you're hovering over one of these straight lines, notice that your cursor changes to have all those little, like a little rectangle below it. When that happens, you can click on it and drag it to reposition it and move it around. All the points travel together. Once you've done that, click Command-Z to undo that move, and click in an empty area to deselect everything. Then switch to your direct selection tool. Remember, the black arrow selects the whole thing. The white one allows you to target just specific points. So move this anywhere over a path. I'm going to go the path between 3 and 4, and I'm going to click. Notice that all of the possible anchor points were selected. They're white, and those are my optional anchor points. I'm going to hover between okay, I did that. Sorry, sometimes it's hard to keep track of this and do what I need to do. Hover your anchor or your cursor over the anchor point number 4. When you're hovering over it, it gets a little bit bigger. We're going to click to select it. Notice that it turns blue, that it's selected. And then with this direct selection tool, we can move individual anchor points. So we can drag that one up. We can say, oh, this should have been a taller triangle. This is really the way, or my crown should be tipped this way, or whatever. So any of these anchor points are editable. You can move them around using the direct selection tool. Click in a blank area of the artboard to deselect everything. And with our direct selection tool, the white arrow, we're going to hover over the path between 5 and 6. And when it changes to have that little black box by the cursor, click once. And then we're actually going to cut out this piece of the path. We're going to go Edit, Cut, or Command X is the shortcut. Notice that just that piece that we had selected is the piece that's cut out. The anchor points stay where they are, but we cut out the path that had connected the two. Now, if we want to reconnect those, if we say, shoot, we should not have done that, this needs to all be connected, how can I get it to reconnect? We're going to switch back to our pen tool. And we're going to move our cursor, the pen cursor, over that anchor point number 5. And notice how it has an asterisk originally saying we can start new. But when we get to anchor point number 5, it switches and it has a diagonal line in the bottom, a slash. That means that if we click, we're going to continue drawing from this point, which is what we want. So we're going to click once. That activates that anchor point, and now you can see I'm starting to draw out from it again. And then I can take it over to I could go anywhere I wanted to and keep drawing around, or to connect them, I can go to the number 6 point, and when I'm hovering over that anchor, notice that your cursor changes to have a little box like with a line through it. That's telling you that it's going to merge the lines if you click. So go ahead and click, and that reconnected our shape. So you can take out pieces, continue drawing on. So we could take out one and add more crown pieces and then eventually reconnect it if we wanted to. Everybody good with that basic lesson? Okay. Let's switch back to the selection tool and click to deselect everything. We are now going to go onto Artboard 2. So either the lower left, or if you're in the Properties panel with nothing selected, you can see your artboards here as well. I'm going to arrow ahead to Artboard 2. And we're going to learn how to make perfectly straight lines when we want to do that. We're going to zoom in a little bit on this lower work area. Here's the shape that we're going to be making. We're going to turn our Smart Guides back on. So under the View menu, or Command U to turn your Smart Guides back on. When you do this, you're going to see those tooltips again, and you're going to know that your line is straight based on the reading that you see. It also helps snap to the Smart Guides when you have that turned on. Grab your pen tool again, the third tool down, and click the anchor point labeled number 1 to start it. And as you're pulling up from that anchor point, it should be trying to snap a straight line. My original click point was not dead center of this gray path. It was off to the left-hand side. So to give me a straight line, I'm kind of off to the left-hand side here. Click on number 2. You know you have a straight line there. We're going to go out now. Actually, we're going to turn off our Smart Guides. So Command U is the shortcut that you need to use to turn them off right now. Now to go out to number 3 and know that you're keeping it perfectly straight. What's the keyboard modifier? Shift, yep. So hold down on Shift. Oh my God, I'm still in that crooked thing that I haven't figured out. Look at that. You guys are getting a straight line, no doubt. holding
Technically,
shift.
The line is always going to be straight.
Level, 90 degree, you're right. It's always going to be straight, but we want it to be completely level. So holding shift will do that. So go up to number 4 without holding any keyboard modifiers because you don't need to. Same to number 5. Now to get it perfectly straight over to number 6, hold your shift key. Same thing going down to number 7, hold your shift key. And then when you're done, command click away from it to deselect your shape. All right, those are straight lines. They all have corner points. When they come into this anchor, they go out at a hard angle. There's no curve here. We're now going to learn about smooth points, where we could tell this point to be a smooth point, and instead of acting like a tip of a roof, it would arch it from point 3 to point 5, all in one big arch, if this were told to be a smooth point. So we're going to go to Artboard 3. With nothing selected and your selection tool, you should be able to pop over to Artboard 3. And we're going to actually start working on this top part first. So where it says Start is where we're going to work. All right, the pen tool, switch back to that, and there's something different that you need to know. If you click once to start with your pen tool, it is going to be a hard anchor point no matter what. Because we don't want this to go out in a straight line from number 1, we can't simply just click to start our point. What we need to do is set our first directional handle. And to do that, you click and drag. And we're going to click and drag from point 1 up to the red dot on point 2. And basically this is telling it that our first curve is going to be going in this direction upward, and it's going to be a curve. So drag up there, let go. All that did was set your first directional handle. Now if you look where your cursor is going, if you pull it off to the right, you see how it's going to connect. Again, just a few years ago, 2 years ago, this rubber banding didn't work, so you didn't see this preview. So it was actually really scary to do this because you didn't know what was going to happen until you went to point 2 and started dragging down. Then your line would appear. Now at least we see a preview. So if we were to just click at point 2, it would put a hard anchor point, and we don't want that. So we click and drag down, and by manipulating this direction handle, we get that arch to match what we want it to. We can skew it to the right or the left. We can make it shorter or longer to get it to match that gray underline underneath it. And it may not be exactly how where that red dot is showing. For me to get it to match up better, I'm kind of off and a little longer. So, curved points have to be made by clicking and dragging. Now look where your rubber band is. Now it's saying, okay, I'm going down. So if we were to go over to where an imaginary number 3 is and click and drag, we're going to go up again. So right now, if we don't do anything other than the skills we've learned, all we can keep doing is making this wavy, snaky shape, up, down, up, down, up, down. And that's fine. Command click away to deselect, and then I want you to go down to the practice area, and I want you to practice. Notice that they didn't put the red dots above it to show you where to go, but remember you click and drag in the direction that you want the arch to go and about as tall as you want it to go. A little bit taller. So on this one, I would start here and I would drag up and I'd go a little bit taller than the arch that I know I want to make. Also, if you don't want this line to wobble like it is, obviously if you hold shift, it's going to stay straight. So make it a little bit taller than the arch that you want. Go over to your next point, click and drag down to make it match the arch that you have here. Another important part is that this doesn't have to be perfect your first time through, because we can always use the direct selection tool, go back, click on an anchor point, and by doing that it's going to activate its 2 directional handles, and we can tweak those handles anytime we want in the future. So as you're doing this today, if it's not matching up perfectly, don't sweat it. You can tweak it at the end. Command click away and keep practicing on these 3 shapes. This one they want you to start on the opposite side. Start on the orange, finish on the red. Just realize you can go in all the directions. And then this one, remember you drag in the direction that your first arch is going to go. So we would drag this way and then drag this way. So practice with those 3. Everybody doing okay with that? Okay, we're going to move on to Artboard 4. And that's basically what we just saw. So you can start at the top with the start because that shows you the red dots to give you an idea of what you're doing. So grab the pen tool, click and drag up to set your first directional handle, click and drag down to set your second, click and drag up. And like I said, we're just making that wavy, snaky looking shape because we don't yet know how to change our handles. So that first one that has all of the dots showing is a little bit easier maybe. Go down and practice on the lower one where they don't draw out the red dots for you and do your best to get that to match up. And like I said, if you don't get it perfect, I want to show you how at the end, I'm going to match this as best I can right now. So it's the length of the directional handles and the amount of tilt that they have that's changing the curve point between the 2 anchors. And then if you weren't entirely happy with how it turned out, you can come back and get the direct selection tool, click on an anchor point, and your handles come back. And the one that you're targeting is the one that's blue. So if this isn't quite right, I can tweak my directional handles. I can make them shorter or longer to try to get it to match a little bit better. The thing you have to remember, I'm tweaking this point right here, but it's affecting the curve that came before it and the curve that comes after it. It's not just going one way. But you can always go back with the direct selection tool and clean up your selection. So being perfect the first time through is not always necessary, and it can be really time consuming, and it might be faster to come in here and clean this up. You can also move the anchor point itself, not just the directional handles. Okay, the pen tool. All right, let's switch to Artboard 5, and we are going to learn how to change the directional handles, break them off, and make them go in another direction so that we can get this to behave how we want it to. So number 5, we're going to work with the top first. So, using the pen tool, we're going to start at number 1, drag up to set our point. Whoops, that's not the pen tool. Z. Set our first point. Now we're going to come over to number 2 and we're going to click and drag down until we reach the gold dot. There's 2 ways of doing this. I think the second version is the fastest, so I'm going to jump to that. From here, without letting go of our mouse, we're going to hold down the Option key, and that's going to let us break just this lower directional handle. See how it's swinging? And I'm going to say, nope, you can't go down. I want this next curve to go up as well. So I'm taking this directional handle and I'm telling it, hey, you have to go up. And I bring it up to this red dot and I let go. Now that set the directional handle for my next arch to be an upward arch. So again, I go over to number 3, I drag down, I don't let go though. I hit Option, which breaks it off, and I swing it up top here. That's where I want it to go. So to get it to make this caterpillar-like thing, Option, drag it up. It's definitely the fastest way. To get this to work. So you're breaking that directional handle because right now they work in tandem. There's one that goes off to the left, one that goes off to the right. If you shrink one, the other one shrinks proportionately with it. If you twist one down, the other one goes up. They're hooked together like a hand on a clock. Well, that's a bad example because they're not hooked together. They're hooked together. By breaking them, you can make them go like a clock, where one can go one way and another can go another way. All right, so after trying that, with that upper example that showed you dots, go ahead down to the bottom and practice on this where they're just not showing you all of the dots. But again, it's the same idea. Click and drag to set your first arch, then go over to the second point and drag down. Don't let go of the mouse. Hit Option to break it up and spin that directional handle up high to remind it that it's going upward again. And then just keep going and doing that. Again, this tool just requires practice. And eventually it does kind of seem intuitive. Not right away, but eventually. All right, when you get that drawn, we'll do our last practice. And that's going to be combining curves and straight lines, because quite often when you're drawing something, every now and then you do need a straight line, and you do need to know how to switch it to make that different anchor point. So let's go to artboard number 6 and zoom in on the top part. And we can see that our starting point with the pen is going to be to make a curve. So that's easy enough. We're going to click and drag up to set our first directional handle, and then go to number 2 and drag down. And let me just show you what would happen if you did nothing else. If you wanted to go to number 3 as a straight line, no matter how hard you try, you can't, right? That's because this directional handle down here is still telling it that it's coming out of this end of the anchor as a curve, and we don't want that. So it's not going to behave. When we take our cursor and we go back up to that anchor point at number 2, do you notice how it changes and it has a little caret sign below? Click on that point. That broke off that second handle that was going down. Now you have just a straight line. Okay, so you did that. We now have a leading direction that's just a straight line. We're going to come over to number 3. You guys can hold the Shift key to make sure it's perfectly straight. And we're going to click and release on point 3. Now it still thinks we're doing straight lines, and that's a problem. So what we need to do, we need to go over that last point that we created, and when it turns into that caret sign again, or change, we need to press and drag down and say, okay, you're now a curve. We need to make a directional handle, come down here, and then let go. All that did was create the directional handle of that point coming out. So it's no longer a straight line, it's now a curve. So you can see that you can go over to point 4, you can click and drag up, and you're good to go. But now you got to come back down and break that top handle, or whichever one, at the number 4 point. This top handle tells it that whatever's going forward is going to be an upward curve, and we don't want that. So we come back to number 4 and we click to break that and turn it, convert it into the opposite kind of corner point, which is a straight line. Come over to number 5 and click. Now we're in straight line and we can't do that. So we get that convert symbol and we click and drag up because our next arch is going up, or curve. And then we're able to come over to number 6 and finish it out. So by going into that last point that you added, waiting for the change caret to come up, you then know that you can break off a handle or re-add a handle. Okay? All right, let's stop here.